Welcome to Everything Co-op, bringing you information on how cooperatives can help improve your quality of life. This show is being sponsored by the National Co-op Bank, NCB. The NCB is dedicated to strengthening communities nationwide for the delivery of banking and financial services for the nation's cooperatives, their members, and other socially responsible organizations. For more information on the power of community ownership, visit ncb.coop. That's ncb.coop. Now stay tuned for your host, Vernon Oakes.
Good morning, everybody. This is Vernon Oakes. Welcome to Everything Cooperative this wonderful Thursday morning. You know, co-ops can be any business you can think about. Any business that you would like to start, you can start it as a co-op. The difference between a co-op is it depends on who owns and controls the business. If the employees own and control the business, it's called a worker cooperative. And if consumers own or control the business, it is a consumer co-op. Examples of those are housing co-ops or credit unions. And a couple of weeks ago, we had a health clinic that was a consumer co-op that the patients owned and controlled the business. There are 7 principles to the modern cooperative, and my favorite one is the 5th one, which is education, training, and information. And this morning, continue with our theme on the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. Last week, we had Cornelius Blanding, the new executive director of the Federation. And this week, we had John Zippert on, and we're going to talk about this 5th principle. Good morning, John.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm doing just great. How are you doing?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
And, John, I think this is your second time on the program. We're almost at 2 years being on, and I appreciate your taking out time today to come on and talk about education.
I enjoyed the first time. I see the program has expanded to an hour. I think it was a half hour the first time I was on.
It was always an hour, John, but that hour goes by very quickly, so I can see why it felt like a half an hour, because the hour goes by extremely quickly. And I want to start off by thanking you guys for hosting me at the Federation's annual meeting. You were great hosts. What did you have, about 300-400 people there at your conference?
Yes, and you know, people come in and out, and they come for parts and workshops. But we think there were about 400 plus people there at the Federation's Rural Training and Research Center in Epes, and there were 375 people in Birmingham on Thursday night for the Estelle Witherspoon Lifetime Achievement Award dinner.
Now, Estelle Witherspoon, she had something to do, was it Gee's Quilts?
Well, she was the long-time manager of the Freedom Quilting Bee in Alberta, Alabama, which is you go through Alberta to get to Gee's Bend. So, and many of the quilters that worked with the co-op lived in Gee's Bend, and there are some continuing groups. And of course, there was the exhibit of the quilts across the country as the Gee's Bend quilt. Several of the quilts in the exhibit were done by worker owners, members of the Freedom Quilting Bee. So, yes, and it was named for her, the award, because she was one of the founding members of the Federation in 1967. She signed the charter that brought us into existence.
This is a little bit aside from our conversation, but I didn't get a chance to talk to Cornelius about it last week. I would like to buy some quilts for my Christmas gifts. Is there a way that I could get on to one of these co-op quilting companies?
Yeah. Let me get you, and I don't have that in front of me, but I'll get you a website and place to order. Some of the groups have split up a little, but they're all still working as co-ops. And one of the groups works out of the ferry terminal at Gee's Bend. Gee's Bend is named for a bend in the Alabama River. And Alabama River cuts through Wilcox County, so historically there was a ferry connecting Gee's Bend to Camden, Alabama, which was the county seat. But during the Civil Rights Movement, because there were so many people from Gee's Bend coming to demonstrate and try to register to vote in Camden, the county government and the state government did away with the ferry for many years. And it was restored about 10 years ago. And one of the quilting groups is now operating from the Gee's Bend terminal of the ferry. And I think this story sort of speaks to some of the background of what it takes to do the work of the Federation, that we have come out of the Civil Rights Movement, that there is still a residue of hostility to African American people really doing things for themselves. And part of our work is the education and the training and the effort to overcome some of these kinds of problems and then really develop sustainable economic development for people. So I will get you addresses to get quilts. I don't have that right in front of me now, but I'll get it for you.
Well, one of the breaks, I'll look it up to as GEEBEND quilts. So I'll look that up also and see if I can bring it to maybe some other people out there would like to buy some quilts. But you mentioned something that I want to talk about. You said their story is one of the reasons for the Federation is because the U.S. culture has been against African Americans owning businesses and doing things for ourselves, which is one of the reasons I like this co-op business. It's a way that people can come together and work together to create wealth and through owning their own businesses and learning about it. Tell me how this story fits into that. You made that statement. How does it fit into showing how African Americans can come together and create businesses and create wealth?
Well, I think that case and many other places where the Federation is still working today in counties that have historically high rates of poverty, unemployment, out-migration, counties like Wilcox County, counties like Sumter County, where our training center is located, the Black Belt of Alabama, the Mississippi Delta, Southwest Georgia, coastal South Carolina. These are all places where there were high concentrations of black population because these were places during the period prior to the Civil War where there were significant plantations and the use of black labor to harvest cotton, rice, and other products. And then after the Civil War, many of those people were tenant farmers and continued to work the land. Almost all black people in this country can trace their roots back to rural and the agricultural base in the South, where people were in the past enslaved, and they came out of slavery into tenant farming and plantations. Some of the people were able to buy land. In fact, the high point of black land ownership in this country was 1910, when black people owned 15 million acres and were a significant, over 1 million black people engaged in agriculture. And unfortunately, due to economic pressures, racial pressures, and other difficulties, that the ownership of black land has decreased from 15 million acres to about 3 million acres today. So the Federation came out of that whole struggle and that whole history, the civil rights struggle, the struggle for people to retain their land, And the Federation has organized agricultural co-ops, rural credit unions, handicraft worker producer co-ops, and various different other, some housing co-ops, various different kinds of cooperatives out of that history and background. And so that really requires people to have an education and understanding, because my concept of education is that you have to real co-op education, you have to understand it in your head, you have to understand it in your heart, and you have to use your hands and body and full self to carry it out. So some of this is learning new things, and some of this is unlearning some bad habits of views that have been instilled in people, that they can't succeed, that they won't be successful, they can't work together with other people, and all. It's overcoming some of those attitudes and myths that in many ways are reinforced, I think, in the whole public education system in this country. There are very few places where they talk about the cooperative principles and talk about cooperatives when they're teaching economics or how to live a good life. And I think your program is an effort to counteract some of that.
It really is, and that's why the National Co-op Bank is sponsoring this program, to get people the information they need to understand a co-op and get the education. And I really appreciate what you said of overcoming the attitudes and myths. And it takes me all the way back to my first days of teaching mathematics. And the belief system was, I taught it at San Diego State University and in the Afro-American Studies Department. And the belief was the self-fulfilling prophecy. If teachers believed that blacks couldn't do math, then they couldn't. They would do things to make sure that they couldn't. And this is what was happening in a lot of the white universities with white teachers, where if you believed that blacks could do math, then that was the premise by which you could start, and more often than not, you could teach blacks too. Now, we have to take our first break. The first 15 minutes, it goes by very quickly. If anybody has a question of John or myself, please call in at 1-800-450-7876. We'll be right back. Don't touch that dial.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Information is power. That's why this WOL station is a great partner to bring you this information about cooperatives, because with the information, if you use it, this information, you can have power. Power to solve problems in your communities, power to control your own destinies. And the National Co-op Bank is sponsoring this program. Their mission is to help cooperatives grow by supporting and being an advocate for America's cooperatives and their members, placing special emphasis on serving the needs of communities that are economically challenged. And John Zippert is our guest today, who has been talking about some of these communities in the South and the Black Belt that are economically challenged communities. And National Co-op Bank was at the annual meeting of the Federation, and they have been a partner to try to get people out of poverty. And the biggest poverty is, John, let me tell you this quick story, and then I'll get back to this education. I got my MBA from Stanford, and I took one class on black economics. And the main thing I took away from the class is that black people buy depreciating assets like cars and vacation and clothes. They don't appreciate, and where whites will buy appreciating assets, which may be stocks, bonds, artwork, older cars, antique cars, so things that will appreciate, real estate. But since I have lived 40-some years now after that program, I've learned that people that have a poverty mentality will buy depreciating assets, and people that have a wealth mentality will buy appreciating assets. It's not black or white. It's just too many black people have these myths that you've talked about, and that's that poverty mentality that we've learned and we've been taught, that we can't succeed, that we can't work together, the things that are myths that help us to stay in poverty. And so changing those attitudes is a big piece of the education that Federation is about and that I have been about in my teaching days and every day that I teach. So let's talk about, we have talked about the possibility of starting a community college in Epes, Alabama. What do you think about that idea? I mean, we talked about it a little bit when we were down there.
Well, it's an idea. Well, let me begin by saying that the Federation has a rural training and research center in Epes, Alabama, on 1,300 acres of land that we own together with a local corporation called the Panola Land Buying Association. We acquired this 1,300 acres of land through a long struggle and lawsuits and people being evicted from plantation. That's another whole story. But we acquired this land in 1970. The center is on 375 of those acres. We have a dormitory there, which we can house between 40 and 80 people, depending on whether we have 2 people in a room, 3 people in a room, or 4 people in a room. When we have youth events, we usually put 4 people in a room, but it with older adults, we usually put 2 people in a room. So we have a dormitory, we have a kitchen, we have a large auditorium-type building, we have some classroom spaces, we have various demonstrations, including various gardens, organic and non-organic. We have a goat herd where we're raising goats that we spin off to producers who are part of a co-op. We also, a good bit of our 1,300 acres is wooded in trees, so we have various demonstration plots related to trees and timber and non-timber type products income that you can make from the forest while the trees are growing. So we have a rural training center. We have some facilities. Over 20 years ago, we approached the state of Alabama to see if we could get a license to be a post-secondary educational institution, a kind of a vocational training school for agriculture, cooperatives, and other skills related to our work. The barriers for us to do that in terms of the credentials of the faculty, the need for a library and significant number of books, and some of this predates the whole computer revolution, where you basically have every library in the world in your pocket.
At your fingertip, yeah.
So, but some of these things preceded that. There was also the issue of financial stability, that they wanted to see, because what we were trying to do was become a licensed post-secondary education, then institution, then to be able to access federal student aid to help young people from these communities get the education. The process has been, there were so many barriers. We basically decided to do short courses, things like Co-op 101, where we taught people the co-op principles and what co-ops were about and how they could use the cooperative as a way to change their community. We have done some more extensive like a 3-day introduction to what co-ops are doing and some specific ways that worker co-ops could be an answer to creating unemployment and changing rural and urban communities in the South. So we have mostly done smaller segments of an education program. To really develop a school or a vocational school or a community college will take more resources, more partners, and really some more help to realize that goal. I think that's still something the Federation would like to work toward, but we need some help and support to get there. I don't know if that was a long way around to answer your question. So we have some of the building blocks of that kind of vocational training school, but there are some other things we need to add to that.
Well, I met a gentleman from the Rural Community College Alliance, and they have 600 members, and their goals fit right in sync with your goals, with the Federation goals. I came about this conversation because about 4 years ago, I figured out what I want to be when I grow up, and that was to continue to promote co-ops, create co-ops, or develop co-ops. First, there were going to be housing co-ops, and the more I've learned about other co-ops like worker co-ops, I want to help create those. And then the third one is which is what we're talking about now, was I wanted to try to see if I could get current institutions like the Howards or the Stanfords or even Bluefield State, where I got my undergraduate degree from, to create a division in co-ops, whether it's you have an MBA, maybe you could have a cooperative master's in business administration, but to get people to more interested, or to start a school that just focus on co-ops. And that's the business of co-ops and why they function, why working together functions, and how the socialization of co-ops, how that works. When you get a group of people together, working together to help solve problems together, and to figure out when there are going to be disagreements, how to resolve those disagreements, because there will be disagreements. When you have two or more people together, you're going to have disagreements. I even sometimes have disagreements with myself, John. So it's how you resolve the disagreements. So that's what when I came down there was one of the ideas, because I knew you were doing training. I didn't even know that you had all of this that you just described in terms of the facilities and the classes that you're doing, to how to expand those classes to this community college, and maybe getting the help from this Rural Community College Alliance, or there's another alliance, and I'll get their name, of all community associations in the U.S., to try to figure out how we can get the funding and the stability that you're talking about. And I would love to work with you on this if this is something that you all would like to do. I have to take our next break, though. If you have any questions or comments of John Zippert or myself, call in at 1-800-450-7876. Anything to do with co-ops, we'd like to hear. John has been in this for 45 years, and he's only 46 years old, so he's been doing it a long time. We'll be right back. Please don't touch the dial.
$14.50 WOL.
Welcome back. This is Vernon Oaks on Everything Co-op. We're talking about the benefits of cooperatives, no matter what type of business you could think of. It could be in a form of a co-op. At Greenbelt, right here in Maryland, Greenbelt has 7 co-ops, and they're looking to create additional co-ops. I was at Greenbelt Homes, which is 1,600 apartment unit cooperative housing co-op built in the 30s and 40s. And in their lobby, they said, a plaque said that co-ops gives people the tools to control their own destiny. Co-ops gives people the tools to control their own destiny. And that was huge for me, because those tools turn out to be education, knowledge, to change bad myths that John has already talked about. John Zippert from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. and also give new information to get knowledge so people can make informed decisions. And when folks make informed decisions, they make better decisions, and therefore they control their destinies. It seems to fit. So what we're talking about today is this fifth principle of cooperatives is education, training, and information. And John has been talking about how the Federation has a training center in Epes, Alabama. Epes is 115 miles or so south of Birmingham. And why this education is so extremely important. So, John, the other association is the American Association of Community Colleges, and they have methods for helping people start community colleges. But I also did a little bit more research on how to start a college, and it seems like the same way you start any business. They talk about 7 ways that right in the middle of that is a business plan. Figuring out first thing is the purpose of the college, and we've already talked a lot about that. Getting advice and funding, preparing a business plan, going to the state and get the regulatory and founding requirements. Like, I would doubt that you'd have to have this huge library today because, like you said, that was 20 years ago, and the computer wasn't as big as it used to be, and you could probably do a lot of classes on the computer online. Marketing the college and getting accreditation. So I think you've got a tremendous foundation with what you already do and knowledge that people already have of what you do in your area. And the reason that co-ops are formed most of the time is because to solve some community issue. And from everybody that's been on this program almost 2 years now says that co-ops normally provide as good as, if not a better product or service for the same, if not a lower price. So I would think that a Federation community college could provide an excellent education at the same, if not a lower price for its clientele in these rural communities. Do you think you could do that?
I think so, and I just want to circle back around to some things you said in the segment just before this. I think the Federation would welcome, and I think we need to maybe talk about this outside of this radio program, how we would get together with those, the rural community college group you mentioned and the others, and see how we could sort of begin again working back to those goals, including the possibility of courses online. So we welcome those partnerships. We welcome your help in connecting us with the right people there and in other places. I should also say that the Federation has been working over the last 2 years with Tuskegee University in Tuskegee to help them develop a course in cooperatives, a master's degree course. And we've actually had some student interns who are going into that program to spend the summer working with us at the Federation's office in Atlanta, which is our fiscal and accounting office where Mr. Blanding's office is. And we also had one of the interns working with one of our agricultural cooperatives in Mississippi. But beyond the internship part, we have been talking with them about the course content and all of that. And the Federation has historically worked particularly with the 1890 land-grant colleges, and we have 2 of those in Alabama, Tuskegee and Alabama A&M, which is in the northern part of the state. So I think we really want to explore this. I think one of the issues that's going to come up is that, most of the community colleges that I have seen are state supported, and how we work around including Pell Grants and federal financial support. I'm not sure we want to be the same as all of the other community colleges in Alabama that are part of a state network, so to speak. The other thing is that internationally there are a number of co-op schools. There's one at St. Francis Xavier University in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, which really sort of concentrates on training co-op people from the third world type or lesser developed countries or countries that are in the development process. And the Federation over the years has actually sent some people to Antigonish to learn. I also know there's a cooperatively owned college in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. I went there for a week one time. And so there are some models and institutions, even internationally, that we could look at, because I think that this, at least for the Federation, this college or this vocational school has to be a little different, and it really has to be owned and controlled by the co-ops, and it has to be able to do this teaching work of combating the internalized oppression of people, combating the poverty of people, combating the kind of residues of institutionalized racism that still exist in the environments where the Federation is working to change things.
I think it still exists in the United States, sir. Okay. I'm just bigger than where you are.
Well, okay. I think sometimes the people in Alabama and Georgia and Mississippi, they specialized in institutionalized racism. They know how to do it.
Well, I grew up in Bluefield, West Virginia, with South, and we had the colored only bathrooms and where you'd go drink water and so forth. I remember my grandfather almost spanked me one time because I'm 4 or 5 years old, and I went to the white-only drinking fountain not knowing. And he scared me, but he got it a point across. He'd rather scare me to make sure I did not go to that white-only fountain and, maybe get beat up or hurt or killed. So it's very much in the South. But when I came to visit family, my mother's family was from New York. When I would go to visit them, I found systemic racism in New York. Working there in the summers and so forth, it was they would smile at you, but the results were the same. A bigger smile. We're in this ornery toward you. But so I think institutional racism is throughout the U.S. It's in our, when you look at some of the things that I've learned just with the farming bills and how the FDA would give money to white farmers and not to black farmers. Well, that's the government was racist in their policies and they're implementing their policies. So it was throughout the whole U.S. So we've got to find ways of still overcoming that. And I think it's through education and getting rid of the myths. I agree with you. Any comments on that, what I just said?
Well, I think that is another focus of the Federation is the whole advocacy for public policy changes for rural people and communities. And I don't disagree that their institutional racism remains. I think if you look at the fact that the wealth of the average black family is less than $10,000, and the average wealth of a white family is $150,000, and some of that relates to housing and neighborhoods and all kinds of decisions which are influenced by race. And then the government policies, USDA in terms of agricultural policy and making loans available to black farmers farmers and black landowners, there was a history of discrimination and all of that. And even programs like Social Security, when it was first enacted, farm labor and domestic labor, which were the two areas where black people work was concentrated, in the 30s, 40s, 50s, were excluded from the Social Security program. So these things did not happen by accident. They are, in fact, where institutional racism gets woven into the fabric of America. And part of what we have to do is work to get it out. We need compensatory programs. The Federation has pushed for set-asides in the programs of USDA in terms of the loans and the conservation assistance and the housing programs, that they must be targeted toward the poorest people and people who have been historically underserved. We've had some success in that over the years since the mid-1980s, but we've also had setbacks. And the current Congress, instituted things like sequestration, and one time they, in fiscal year 13, they left out the 37 programs that we had gotten into the Farm Bill, left them out of funding for a year. They've just been, this is a continuing battle. We have to be vigilant all the time.
John, we have to take our third break, and I totally agree, and I stop. We have to be vigilant all of the time. It's consistent and continuous. But we have to take our break. We get the news, the weather, and traffic, and then we'll be right back. We have only one more left, and we'll talk some more about this training, education, and the state of the U.S.
News updates on the web at WOLDCnews.com.
Information is power. John, I got to say one more thing. I when I was talking to Cornelius last week, my fourth goal is to give monies, to donate monies over and above tithes to the International Cooperative Alliance and to the Federation. And last year, based on what I gave at the Fed for your annual meeting and others, it came out, I gave $2,100. Now, I normally don't talk about what I give, because I found out in life that people would always say, oh, you're saying this or you did this because you have some underlying purpose. And I don't have any underlying purpose except for to help you. My purpose is to help you guys do what you do. But I heard about 3 months ago a preacher say that you've got to tell when you give money, because that gives you a chance to talk about the goodness of God. And I wasn't able to say that last week. We ran out of time, so I didn't want to run out of time this year. God has been extremely good to me, which gives me an ability to give money and give money to organizations like yours. So next year, my goal is twice that. That's $4,200 But again, I'm telling this to people out there and to you is because God has been extremely good, and I think we keep him in the picture. We can get this community college up, or much more formal education than what you've been doing in the past, to advance what you've been doing. And I would want to help you work if we create some committee or something to get this done with the Federation, and starting off with a business plan and looking for support however we can get it. We have someone on the phone. That's John.
How you doing, gentlemen?
Fantastic. How are you?
Great. I'm in the city of Cleveland. I own some warehouse property here in the city of in Cleveland, and I am looking to get into manufacturing, solar panel manufacturing. And, just listening to the gentleman speak, I was wondering, would it be possible for me to receive your information or, get together with you to talk about possible opportunities for the people of Cleveland? Are you working in this area? Things such as that.
John, you want to answer that?
Yes. The Federation is doing some work in Cleveland with a group that's doing hoop houses. These are plastic greenhouses on vacant lots in Cleveland. There are also some other groups in Cleveland. I'm not sure the exact name of the project, but I know they have a laundry and some other businesses. Maybe you know the name of that. There is a worker co-op effort in Cleveland already that you should be linked to.
And John, that's the Evergreen Cooperatives. They have 3 different businesses. One is a laundromat, if you will, working with universities and colleges to do their laundry. A second one is they are installing solar panels. So it would be wonderful to talk with them if you could make solar panels that they could install. And the third one is that they are growing. They have urban farming in glass houses, whatever that's called. You know more about that, John, than I do.
Yeah.
But I just Googled Evergreen Cooperatives, and you can get all of their information there. And there's a group from the Maryland area that's been helping them to get that up and going. And they have about 40 employees. One of their goals is to increase, employment.
Okay.
Well, let me also say to this gentleman and everybody else in your audience is that the Federation has a website, www.federation.coop, www.federation.coop, C-O-O-P. And the .coop is a URL that's reserved for cooperatives. You might have spoken about that.
I have in the past.
On other programs. So www.federation.coop. And let me also say that on that website, there is a way to contact us for this gentleman to get further information, but I do think Evergreen is a good starting point for him.
Great.
But this website also has a way to ask for information and to donate funds. The Federation of Southern Cooperatives is a IRS 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit cooperative of cooperatives, and we any contributions or donations to us, financial, equipment, other resources, specialist time, all of that is eligible for tax consideration as a charitable donation. So go to the website, and again, Vernon, we want to thank you for your support. I'm also part of some efforts in Alabama and the South to create philanthropy in the black community. We have the Black Belt Community Foundation. We have the Southern Partners Fund. And these are groups where we're encouraging every black person to become a philanthropist, even if they only give a few dollars every month. But, we welcome people like you, who can give according to their capacity. But we have lots of different ways of doing that, and the Federation, as I said earlier, does accept tax-deductible donations and contributions.
If you go to the federation.coop webpage, right in the middle, it says make a donation. So they make it really easy for any of us to make donations. John, let's go back to this community college, because one idea that I've been toying with was to make it either a worker co-op or a consumer co-op, where you have a school that's either owned by the people that work there, the janitors, the teachers, the management, everybody all the way up, or it could be owned by the people that go to school. Like we have these student housing co-ops. The student housing co-ops, the students own the houses. They either own them or they rent them, but they're responsible. And they'll have work groups that will do, buy the food or raise the food or cook the food or clean the house. They have these different groups that take care of the house, and they really learn responsibility in a way that you were talking about, getting knowledge and putting that knowledge to use. And that's why I like this cooperative model. Matter of fact, if I think we could get all of this people in college into a co-op, they would learn a whole lot about living life, working together in groups. So what do you think about the possibility of this community college, which you talk about being different, it would be a cooperative?
I think that's something we need to explore, even possibly as a hybrid between the people who work there and the people who would come there to study or who would study online. I think that's a good idea. In the Federation's case, the Federation is a cooperative of cooperatives. So our training center is already owned by cooperatives. It's not quite the model you're suggesting, where the people who actually work there are part of a worker co-op and the people who study there are part of a learning co-op. But maybe there's some way to create some kind of hybrid institution that is a co-op all the way around. Mm-hmm. The facility is owned by co-ops. The learners are in a co-op. The people who work there are in a worker co-op. I'm certainly interested and willing to explore that and consider that as part of our sort of feasibility and marketing and economic study of what it will take to make this work and be sustainable.
Well, off air, I'd like to get with you and let's talk about when we can meet and when we can get started, because knowledge without implementation is useless. Matter of fact, I think it's worse to have knowledge and not use it than not have the knowledge at all, because once you get the knowledge, it's sort of expected that you would use it. So let's see how we can get moving on this one to start this plan and start working with different partners to see how we could get it going, either started next September or the September after that. But really, I'm really interested in seeing what we can do, John. Any last comments? We only have a minute left.
Well, just again, for more information, visit the Federation's website, www.federation.coop. And, there's a way there also where you can contact us and send us information. My address is P.O. Box 95, Epes, EPES, Alabama, 35460. P.O. Box 95, Epes, Alabama, 35460. And Epes is halfway between Meridian, Mississippi, and Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Okay, John, if you can make a donation, please do. And if you don't have money, send up a prayer.
Great.
Thank you, buddy. We'll talk to you.
Thank you. Okay.
We'll see you next Thursday, everybody. Have a great, wonderful, cooperative week.
1450 WOL.